Welcome to the Drawing Board. I'm your host and in-house artist, Erin Leffler. If you're not familiar with the Drawing Board, here's a quick recap of what happens on the show. Every episode of the Drawing Board, I invite a guest from the comics and entertainment industry. We learn a little bit more about what they do. And while we learn about what they do, I'm also drawing them. Pretty fun, right? Well, I'm so excited about my guest today because you've seen his work before and you just may not know it. Helping design characters from Black Widow, Captain Marvel, and Ant-Man and the Wasp, he's done a lot of cool things with Marvel Studios. Please welcome my friend Andy Park. Hi, Andy.
Hey, what's up? How's it going?
Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Now, for kids who don't know, because, designing characters and stuff on screen can kind of be a little complicated to comprehend, can you just describe to us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, I am a concept artist by trade. I used to be a comic book artist early on in my career, but for the past 10 years, I've been working for Marvel Studios. I'm currently the director of visual development, and we have an in-house group of artists that work on all the films. And basically, our main job is to design the characters, the heroes, the villains, creatures, whatever you see in the Marvel MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So yeah, like Erin mentioned, I designed Ant-Man, Wasp, Hela, Captain Marvel, a bunch of characters. So obviously we're taking the comic book source material. We're not just making these out of thin air. We're looking at the original comic books and the amazing creations that all these artists have made for decades, in the past decades, like Jack Kirby and so many other artists. And we're interpreting that for reality, for the film reality. So when you see it, you can believe those spandex wearing, comic book characters come to life for the stories that we're telling. So we're designing those characters, we're painting them up. We're helping come up with their visuals, and then of course a lot of them become costumes on real actors, then working with the costume designers. Or if they're like a VFX character like Korg or Thanos or Hela, then it becomes more of a CG type of character on top of a actor. So in a nutshell, designing characters for film, that's kind of what we do.
That's super cool. Now, you had mentioned you were a comic book artist before, so you've been an artist for quite some time. How long have you been in the art profession?
This is my 25th year working as a professional. I know it's
That's
crazy,
awesome.
like quarter of a century, but I started when I was 19 years old. So, I was a young little lad when I got pulled away from college. I was going to UCLA at the time. And a guy named Rob Liefeld, if you guys know him, he's a comic book artist, one of the founders of Image Comics, created Deadpool. He hired me to work in his studio called Extreme Studios. So, he pulled me out of college and I started drawing comic books. Eventually, I started working for Marc Silvestri, another co-founder of Image Comics and his Top Cow Productions, drawing like Tomb Raider, different books, and then eventually for Marvel Comics, doing like X-Men and Excalibur, stuff like that. So the first 10 years of my career was drawing comic books. That was my original love when I was like in junior high and high school. I in the 80s, in early 90s, I fell in love with comic books. So, following artists like Jim Lee and, all the Image founders and so many different artists, that was my dream, to become a comic book artist. So I got to achieve that, early on in my career. So that was a lot of fun.
That is really cool. Now, when did the switchover happen to visual development? Because that's quite a different thing from drawing comic book scenes.
Yeah, because in between my 10 years of doing comic books, I did take a two-year hiatus where I decided I wanted to get a formal education in art, because up until that point, I was always a self-taught artist. A lot of comic book artists are like that, right? So I was one of those who never had any formal education, but I wanted to expand my horizons and learn how to paint, how to see color. I wanted to learn different mediums. So it was during that time that I started, exploring other options, what's out there. And then by that time, the internet was really flourishing. So, and then I was starting to see concept artists like Justin Sweet and different digital artists. So at that time, the whole idea of becoming a concept artist was a new thing, for video games, mainly video games. You didn't see much film art, but it was mainly video games. So around that time, that's when I started like having the kind of the yearning for wanting to pursue that, because I love the idea of doing full paintings, designing characters. Because in comic books, you're pretty much just drawing with a pencil, you
Yeah.
know. But I love, but especially after going to school, I love doing the full illustration, the full colors and everything. So I think that was part of the appeal of doing concept art. So I started building a portfolio on my own while I was drawing like the X-Men, you know, and Tomb Raider. I was starting to build a portfolio, knowing I wanted to make that transition to become a concept artist. So that's eventually I built enough to apply into video games, and I landed a job over at Sony Santa Monica in 2005. So then I started working on the God of War video game for the PlayStation.
That's amazing. And that sounds like that's a lot of hard work that goes. I feel like we just kind of take for granted that because we just see the characters on screen. You don't tend to typically think, if you don't have training in it, what goes behind making a character, and especially with how much learning you have to go through to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. I hear from some people, they're like, especially when it comes to the comic book movies, they're like, wait, why do you have to design it? It's already designed from the comic books, isn't it? You know, Jack Kirby and all these people, they've already created the character, which is true, but it's not just a one-to-one. You take a character like Hela and just make it into the movie. You know, there's myself and a bunch of other artists. We're all doing different interpretations, you know, because there's 100 different ways you can interpret any character like Ant-Man and turn them into what we see, what we saw in the MCU. So it's a lot of, typically I always get asked, like, how long does it take to design one character that you see in the MCU? And just in the concept art phase, I would say it takes, the quickest it would be like 1 month, but that's very rare. Usually it takes anywhere from like a couple months to even 6 months to design one character, right? And then from there, then it has to go to the costume designer, and then they spend another, 3 months trying to, 3, 4, 5 months manufacturing and really and further interpreting and trying to figure out these costumes onto the actor. So it takes like a total of up to a year just to get that one costume that you see on screen. And there's dozens and dozens of people, including the concept artists, and then the people like in the costume department who actually make it, all the amazing artisans and the seamstresses and the costume makers and builders. It takes that much work just to get that one costume that you see on film.
That is super incredible. And I love how you just described that, because I love getting to ask about the process of how long it takes. Because a lot of times with anything we see in the media that we hear, it's deceptively simple because it's just there in front of you. You don't see the process. Yep. So learning about these things, I feel, is a very important thing, because it is a fun job, but also requires a lot of hard work.
Totally. And that's part of, why myself, my coworkers, we do like social media, Instagram. We'll do interviews like this because, most people out there, just like you're saying, don't know what goes into these films. They're fans of these films. They watch them. And then at the end, they only stick around for the end credits because they know there's going to be a scene at the end, but they have to sit and endure through those thousands of names. But man, those thousands of names, they're like sacrificing their time with their friends and family. They're dedicating their lives, putting so many hours into creating every aspect that, that it entails to make a film. So, I have so much respect for every department, every person who puts so much hard work, all just for 2.5 hours or 2 hours. It's crazy.
Definitely, between beginning to work in the field and having friends who work in the field now, you definitely take a lot more into consideration and sit through those credits and be like, I appreciate all these people, because it's so much work.
Totally. And that's why, for every film we do, we get to go to the premieres, and then it's so fun because you get to go with not only the actors, but you get to go with your peers and people who have worked on the film. So whenever the credits go down, and you could tell like different sections of the theater is, that's where the VFX people are sitting, because when their names come up, you hear little claps in the side. And then when it comes to our department, the visual development department, we all like pat each other on the back and like, yeah. So it's just really fun.
I love that. Now, a really fun question I love getting to ask because this is something that I typically get asked a lot at Comic Cons. Now, you and I both did Ace Comic Con back in 2019. The Ace shows are so much fun and it's very family friendly, so kids are always there. Every time I do one of the Ace shows, a lot of kids come up and they all say the same thing. So I love getting to ask this and get differences and like what people like to do because a lot of kids feel like you can't have any fun unless it's to do with your job. Unless you're doing your job, you can't have a hobby. So for you, what are some hobbies that you have outside your job that you enjoy?
Yeah, well, it's funny because throughout my life, I've had so many hobbies. As I get older, it gets tougher and tougher. I have 2 kids, I have a wife, and this job is kind of all encompassing because the time becomes an issue. When I was, younger and single, like I had a lot more time to do a lot of hobbies. So the hobbies become lessened as I get older. But things that I've always been into, like certain sports, I've always been into volleyball and tennis and ping pong. These have always been kind of my sports. But, as I get older, it gets harder and harder to play. And not only physically, whether you're capable or not, but it's also because, all my peers are in a similar life stage. They're all parents, and even if I call them, say, hey, let's go play tennis, they're busy with their kids or they're, with their wives or whatever. Music's always been a big part of my life. I always played the guitar. You see a drum set behind me, but I'm not really a drummer. I play for fun, but I'm not one of those, people that say, "Oh, I play for fun," and then when I play, I'm like, I'm awesome. I actually just play for fun, and it's not awesome, but it's fun for me. So that's something that don't show people, but I do it for myself. But guitar, I was always a little better at, but like I mentioned, I am playing less and less these days, guitar. But besides that, my free time is spent with my kids. So, every free moment I get, I'm playing with my 7-year-old son, my 12-year-old daughter. We love going out to eat, not in recent months, but
Yeah.
I play a lot of role playing with my son, who just loves to do battles, and he's a big MCU fan, so we're always pretending to fight and be different characters. And then besides that, hanging out with my friends, going out. We love to go to restaurants. We love to kind of just meet up and hang out with them. But obviously, in the past many months, we haven't been able to do that.
No, and I love the fact that you included spending time with your family as a hobby because I think that's such an important thing that we tend to lose these days. So thank you for bringing that out. That's a great thing to.
Yeah. And then besides that, just, watching always with my wife, we love watching movies, and of course the streaming shows. So we're constantly trying to catch up because there's actually never enough time to watch every single show. You have those conversations with your friends and coworkers, and there's just a billion great shows and movies, and it's a great problem to have, because you can never watch them all. But we're gonna try.
You can never get bored then. It's always something new.
I know, exactly.
So this is something I love getting to bring up because this is something that plenty of people in the entertainment industry go through. But more specifically for artists, we get a lot of rejections, whether it be jobs that we want, whether it be maybe scholarships when we're first starting out that we want. We face rejections in pretty much every way you can. Should kids take these rejections personally along the way, or is it something that they can use and learn from down the road?
Well, I think the rejections are always going to be part of your life. So it's you have to have a thick skin. You have to have a strength in moving forward. If you watch Captain Marvel, if you watch that movie, that's kind of the message of that movie, right? You get knocked down. What's going to set one person apart from the other is the one that gets knocked down and then wallows in pity and then just crawls away into a hole, versus the one that will stand back up and be persistent and will use that rejection to motivate them. It's not about, I'm going to get back at you or I'll show you. Sometimes people use that as a motivator, but I think more importantly is using the times you do get rejected to figure out, okay, what do I need to do? What steps do I have to make? You should always be making a step forward, even if it's just one step at a time. So if it's an art job, you get rejected, your next step should always be to improve your portfolio, because even though that portfolio that I have got rejected by Nickelodeon, doesn't mean that every company will reject you. It might mean, Warner Brothers might, accept or hire you, because it's not an objective thing. Everything's subjective, right? Mm-hmm. But your goal as an artist, whether you're an artist or whatever profession you're in, should be to make your portfolio or whatever skill set that you have that you're trying to sell, you're trying to make yourself better. So it should never be, I have this portfolio in my hand, and then now I'm going to spend the next 2 years trying to sell this portfolio, and that's it. No, you should sell yourself for the next 2 years or however long it takes, but this portfolio should constantly be changing. This portfolio should constantly be better. Like if it's not better the next month from the previous month, then you need to adjust that, because it's constantly be getting better. And that's always been my philosophy throughout my career. Like even to this day, even after 25 years of working as a professional, I'm still trying to improve my portfolio, improve myself as an artist.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a very important thing too, because a lot of people see online these people with an innumerable amount of followers. They think, oh, these people have no challenges. They're just good at what they do. They've always been that way. But the reason that they get to that point is because they're constantly pushing themselves, constantly trying to get better. And I love that you brought that out, because that's such an important thing with art, to always constantly strive to get better. Totally.
That's what it takes, constantly, never resting on your laurels. Again, that's my philosophy. It's always pursuing to better yourself.
Yeah. Now, this is something that ties into that very much, because when you get rejected for a job, that's highly because it's very competitive, this industry in particular. Mm-hmm. We are ingrained with competitiveness online. Are you doing as well as this other person posting stuff? Are you getting this job? Are you doing this? It's a constant barrage of it, and it can be hard sometimes to differentiate competitiveness with pushing yourself to be better. So do you find that within the industry that at times it's easier to be competitive against other people, or do you find that you like to create like a nice little creative bubble where you can learn from these other people and maybe, encourage each other to do better?
Yeah, I feel like my motivator throughout my life has not been competition. I know everyone's different, but throughout my whole career, when I look at people online, when I look at art books, when I look at Instagram, I'm not thinking, how can I beat this guy or how can I beat this girl? That's never been my thing. And I know some people have that, but I feel like that shouldn't be your focus, because if that's all you're doing, then when are you ever going to be happy? You're never going to be satisfied, because there's always going to be someone better than you. So I've never had that mentality of, and I know whether some people might disagree with me, but I've never had that mentality that I need to be the best. I need to be the best artist in the concept art world. I need to be the best film artist. I need to be the best artist at Marvel Studios. I don't have that mentality, because I feel like if I did, I'd never be happy, because there's always going to be someone that I'm going to think is better than me. So I'm just going to be depressed, right?
Yeah.
My philosophy has always been, I'm going to try to make myself the best that I can be. So I'm trying to focus more on myself and reflect more inwardly rather than looking outwardly at all my external circumstances, because at the end of the day, I feel like the only thing that we can control is ourselves, but I can't stop you from getting better. I can't stop, one of my coworkers from getting better, but I can control myself and how much I choose to invest in myself as an artist and my skill sets. So that's kind of always been my focus. How can I make myself the best Andy Park that I can that I can be, rather than looking outside. And looking outside is good, and I definitely do that, but it is used as inspiration, like, so a lot of times I will look at, Instagram or other artists, and I always tell people social media is a double-edged sword, right? It's like, it's great that we have that, but it's also this rabbit hole of like, you can really fall into like depression because you look at everyone else and you're just like, everyone's so good, or they can do stuff that I can't do, but I want to do that. And if you just get stuck at looking at your phone and looking at people, I think that the idea is you should be focusing more and spending more time on your own skill set, rather than spending more time on looking at other people's skill sets,
Yeah.
So there needs to be that right balance, so it should be more on yourself rather than constantly look at other people and only looking at them, but use the other people as a motivator, but not necessarily because like, I'm gonna beat that guy.
Absolutely. Now, this is one I have not had anybody on the show who's worked on things like you have, and I think this is really cool because in connection with your job, I love the fact that you were able to get to help with a ride for Disneyland in Tokyo or Hong Kong?
Hong Kong.
Okay, so the Ant-Man and the Wasp ride out in Hong Kong. Now that's something interesting because Disney's now integrating a lot of the Marvel stuff into their parks. So what was it like to help get to work on stuff that was used in the ride?
That was yeah, no one's brought that up yet in all the interviews I've done. No, that's great. It's great because it's awesome because I grew up in Orange County, Southern California, in Anaheim. If you know where Disneyland is, that's right where Disneyland is, right? So I grew up in Disneyland since I was 5 years old, little kid. And anytime any relatives or friends, like when they came from Korea or visited our family, like we went there and, gave them the tour of Disneyland. So I love Disneyland. And then now that I have kids, like that's a place we would always go to regularly, especially with my free Disneyland pass working at Disney. But except for now, we can't go right now. But so yeah, I love Disneyland. My family loves Disneyland. Grew up there. So to be able to work on a Disneyland ride was definitely a dream because, and especially for a ride, based on characters that I got to lead the film and also design. So that was a real treat. So Ant-Man and the Wasp, Ant-Man and the Wasp Nano Battle? Yeah, Nano Battle in Hong Kong, which is pretty much a rejiggered Buzz Lightyear ride, but they made it like its own thing and really cool. Yeah, so I worked with the Disney Imagineering team over in Glendale, the amazing team over there. I didn't do like a crazy amount of stuff on there, but basically I was doing some stuff for marketing. I got to do the official poster for the ride, and it's so cool because that poster is in the Disneyland park over there. And then I was able to do some drawings because in the ride, there's a moment when Scott Lang is talking to Tony Stark, and he's saying, "Hey, I was doing some brainstorming and had some suggestions on an upgrade. You do upgrades for all the Avengers. Like, I have some ideas." And then he pulls out a drawing, and has his idea of adding an RT, giving him wings and lasers, and even a cup holder, and all these different things. And it was supposed to be Scott Lang drawing this, so I did that drawing, trying to think, how do I make this not too good? So, but still, legible. So I did a drawing, Scott Lang doing one, and I also did one with Wasp with Hope, like as if she drew it. So her drawing is like a little better, still not, like a professional, but doing, a little better, sleeker. And basically hers says, no upgrades necessary. And it's cool because then they made it like into merchandise and T-shirts and all the merchandise that you can buy at the park with those drawings that I did. So I want to go to Hong Kong so I could actually like experience that ride and see that stuff. But that was a treat. That was a treat.
I was gonna bring up the shirts because you put that up the other a couple.
Yeah.
No, and I thought that was the funniest thing because it's so cool to get to see your work like that you didn't know was gonna end up on something like that on a shirt.
Yeah. They told me they were gonna do that kind of stuff. So that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. And then a little what do you call it? Easter egg. If you ever get a chance to look at the Ant-Man and Wasp poster, the Nano Battle, because it's in Hong Kong, you see people riding the ride in the background. So and because it's Hong Kong, they're going to be Chinese, Asian, and everything. So I snuck in myself and my family in there.
Hey, that's always fun.
Yeah.
Now, I want to touch on this as well because with what you've done, you've gotten to work on some movies that have broken box office records, and that's really, really cool. And especially with Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel is Marvel's first solo superhero film that is centered on a female, which a lot of girls absolutely fell in love with when it came out last year. What's it like knowing something that you had a part in helping design and get to where it is now affected the lives of so many little kids across the world?
Yeah, it's this job just keeps on bringing blessings upon blessings. And when I started leading the Viz Dev team on Captain Marvel, I knew we're working on something special. It's the same thing as when Ryan was leading the Black Panther film. But there's all these films. Every film we do, we know it's special. But Captain Marvel in particular, I knew was momentous because everyone's waiting for that, or finally to have a solo female lead the film. Ant-Man and Wasp was the first where she shared the title, but Captain Marvel was a solo. So that was really special to kind of lead the team, design the character, being part of that whole process, and watching them being part of the process of creating the character, going to the fitting, eventually working with Sonia Hayes, the costume designer, and the specialty costume makers in Russ Schinkel with Film Illusions, and going to the costume fittings with Brie Larson, and just slowly watching the costume come alive. And then finally seeing her, film. I went on set, got to watch some of the filming, and then eventually going to the premiere and watching the film. It was special. It's special. And since then I've done a couple cons, like you mentioned. I did Ace Comic Con with you, and Brie was there, right, at that con.
Yeah.
And the amount of conversations I had with fans, and I did San Diego after that as well last year, and the amount of fans that come up to me and they say this is essentially what you're saying, like how much Captain Marvel meant to them. And it's not only females, I get a lot of males as well that are just like how much that film meant to them. Yeah, it makes it all worth it, because you're just like, even though we're not doctors, we're not like saving the world, we're not firefighters, but we're just creating entertainment for people. But I won't take away that this entertainment is important to people. The number of people that I've met that have said how much it's helped them, or it's connected them with their families, or stuff like that. It's like it really puts it into perspective. So that stuff is very rewarding, because I know the MCU, especially in the past 10 years, have been something that people have grown up with. I mean, 10 years, someone that's like, 9 years old, and then they watch it all the way until they're like in college. Is like, that's crazy to think about, but they grew up with these films with their families. So yeah, I feel truly blessed that I get to be part of that.
Now, your work has evolved, obviously, over the years, from going from comic book work to what you do now. Are there any artists or people that helped influence how your work style changed and what it is now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's always, I feel like every artist, we're just a combination, and it's like a stew, like where all of our influences, what were our inclinations, our tastes, our sensibilities. When I was in comic books, the main guy that I grew up um, admiring was Jim Lee, right? So Jim Lee was my main guy. I loved other artists like Alan Davis, Mark Silvestri, and John Byrne, and there's so many different artists, right? But even in the comic book days, I never wanted to be, you saw certain artists that like you could tell exactly who their influences were because they're basically mimicking their style. I always felt like I didn't necessarily want to do that, even though Jim Lee was my main influence. But I felt like if you look at my comic book career, I don't think people really ever called me like a Jim Lee clone. And it's because I've always tried to just kind of take what I love, but then I'm trying to create something on my own. Eventually, when I got into concept art, I started like discovering digital artists, stuff like that. Like I mentioned, Justin Sweet was a huge influence early on. Ian McCaig, and then fellow coworkers like Ryan Meinerding, Charlie Wen, Adi Granov, and then in my studies and just discovering like other American illustrators from the past and artists, the American illustrators like Mead Schaefer and John Singer Sargent, and Norman Rockwell and J.C. Leyendecker, Drew Struzan, like all, these are just some names that pop in my head that all have had like an influence on me, that I definitely admired and that I kind of see as like my artistic mentors, whether they were actually part of my life or it's just something, artists that I've seen that have helped influence me.
I do love how the common consensus I've had two other artists on, I know for myself personally, and now we've all mentioned Drew Struzan. That man is a legend.
Yeah. Because he's, like in the 80s, right? Like he was the poster artist.
He was the poster artist.
Yeah, and every poster he did, like, is so iconic. And man, he would make every single actor look exactly like them, but even better. So yeah, he's a legend. He's a legend.
So for you've gotten to work with so many cool different projects, whether it be comic book wise, whether it be movie wise, or game wise. For you, if you had the opportunity to work on anything with anyone, unlimited budget, you name it, because I love proving to kids that even if you still get to do these really cool things, you can still have dreams along the way. What would you do?
I would be working on. It's kind of crazy because I'm in that. I still pinch myself because with my background of loving comic books, the fact that I'm working on comic book movies and in particular Marvel comic movies, because that's what I collected when I was during my grade school years was Marvel comics. I dabbled in DC comic books back then, but I just never really gravitated toward those characters. So it was always Marvel characters. So I am doing, I'm fortunate enough that I am working on the characters and films that I would want to work on. If I'm thinking about things outside of comic books, I was a big, I watched cartoons in the 80s. So one of my favorites was Robotech. Then that one hit me more. That one, Transformers, G.I. Joe.
Ooh, all good ones.
Thundercats. Those were kind of my favorites, but Robotech probably was my favorite one because I was watching that. I forgot what grade I was in, but that, if you remember that show, when you watch Transformers, G.I. Joe, all those other ones, like no one ever dies. Yeah. Right, and you don't really have like romances and those kind of subject matter, but Robotech was the one where characters were dying and there was romance and there was love triangles and there was drama, and so it was almost like my first introduction to like a cartoon series treating me like not just a little kid,
Yeah.
So it was more adult or whatever. So yeah, I think a Robotech film, it's one of those, like, I'd love to work on it, but at the same time, it's hard to imagine that they would ever do it justice.
No, I get that. There's a lot of things where they announce that they're going to make them into movies, and you're like, I don't know if that's a good move.
Yeah, yeah. Somehow Marvel has pulled it off though.
Very
I
well,
never,
surprisingly.
yeah, I never would have expected that an Avengers film could actually work on film.
I remember
Uh,
seeing the original Avengers film because I grew up just like you, big Marvel Comics fan. My dad got me into it as a kid. And I
oh,
remember
nice.
going and seeing it, and I was like, I don't know if this is a good idea because of what happened with the Spider-Man movies. This might not be a good call.
Yeah.
Marvel just seems to keep topping themselves, and it's thanks to work with visual development, like with people with you. That's just absolutely incredible.
Oh, I give all the credit to Kevin Feige. He's the mastermind. He's the one with the vision, and he's making all the right decisions. But at the end of the day, he understands. I always say, because he understands two things. He understands films and he understands comic books. You know, and not, we've seen other filmmakers, stuff like that. And usually, it's either like, oh, they really understand film, so they're a good filmmaker. But then you could tell they're not a fan of the comic, so that's where it goes wrong. Or you have the other way around. You have someone who's like really into the comic, but they don't understand how to make film, because film is a different storytelling avenue than a comic book.
Right.
But to have someone who understands film, how to make a good film, and understands and respects the source material, the comics, you have that perfect combination in Kevin.
Definitely. So, your career has been super cool. I'm sure you've got a lot of different memories from what you've done and worked on. Are there any that particularly stand out to you from what you've done over the years?
Oh man, so many, because I'm entering my 11th year at Marvel Studios. Um, One memory that I have that was always really fun, and it's one of those, like, I wish somebody was recording it. I got to work with Paul Rudd, on Ant-Man, and then Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Captain America: Civil War, on his costume and stuff like that. But one time, it was near the end of work. I was at Marvel Studios, and I had to go show Kevin Feige one of my paintings. So, I had my bag because I had to leave right afterwards, but I had an iPad that I can show him, or I think I had a printout. So I went over to the executive lounge, because that's, where his office is. And, it's almost like they're having a party. There's all these people there. There's some people playing ping pong. And I saw Kevin, and I said, "Hey, Kevin, can I show you this painting?" I showed it to him. He said, "Cool." And then, who was playing ping pong? It was Lou D'Esposito and Victoria Alonso, the two other heads of Marvel Studios, right? And then they saw me and they said, "Hey, Andy, I heard you play ping pong." And that's when I said, "I don't play ping pong. I play table tennis." No, I didn't say that, but I did. I said, "Oh, where'd you hear that from?" He said, "Oh, Ryan told us." I'm like, "Well, I dabble a little bit," and they said, "Hey, come play with us." And then from that moment, I opened up my bag, and then I pulled out a case, and inside that case is my own ping pong paddle. And it happened to be, I just happened to have it, because it's one of those things. Once you really get into ping pong, like, you have to have your own paddle, because the feel and touch is not the same with other paddles. So I started playing with them. It was me and just kind of rallying against Lou and Victoria. And then eventually I was like, I need, it's 1 against 2. I need a partner. I looked to my right. Who's standing over there? Happened to be there. It was Paul Rudd. And I was like, "Oh, Paul." He happened to be there. So I was like, "Hey, Paul, do you want to play ping pong?" He's like, "Oh, okay." So he came over, and he was up. So it's me and Paul versus Victoria and Lou. We're playing, just having fun. And while we're playing, I'm just thinking in my head, "Please, somebody videotape this or take pictures." But of course, I can't say that out loud. But and also, if it's even cooler, because if you've watched Friends in the past, Paul Rudd's character, Phoebe's husband.
Yep.
he was, they had that whole episode with him playing ping pong with Monica and having this full-on battle. Makes it even cooler. But that was a fun, special moment that I will treasure, but have no evidence of.
I gotta be honest, the whole twist of pulling out your own ping pong paddle, I think the best thing I have ever heard. I was not expecting that.
I know, you can't plan that.
It's just like, I've come prepared.
I know, exactly. It's like
I was not expecting this.
Yep, I was kind of embarrassed to pull it up, but at the same time, it's the only way to play. I can't use other paddles.
That is the best thing I've heard. That was a great story. Sharing that totally made my night.
Yeah, awesome.
So if there's a kid out there right now who's watching this, whether they want to get involved in comics, visual development for games, for movies, or just art in general, or if now they're just interested in learning about any of these from watching this, what would be something that you would want them to walk away from watching this knowing?
Well, for young people, young artists, it's all about, I mentioned early on, it all comes down to your portfolio. So people always ask, how do you get the jobs? How do you, and when it comes to any field in art, whether it's animation, concept art, comic books, film, whatever it is, illustration, it all comes down to that portfolio. I'm doing this motion like as if people carry on portfolios anymore. It's more like portfolio, the iPad, right?
Because I used to do that too. I had like a briefcase.
I know. that shows you my age. I'm holding a portfolio, but now I don't have an iPad with me. But
most of them
shoot. Yeah. Or people have it on their phones now, but it's too small. So I would advise using an iPad. But your focus should be on getting that portfolio, your artwork. Having at least 10 to 20 solid pieces that showcase who you are, that showcase your skill set, and being focused on the type of job that you're trying to get. So if you're trying to get to animation, then you need to do research on the types of jobs that you can get. There's a storyboard artist is different than a character concept artist, different than a background painter, and then within concept art, you can be a character designer, or you can be more into environments, or you can be a creature designer or a vehicle designer, prop designer. There's so many different categories. So it's about you doing the research and seeing what's out there. And what's great is, now all the information's online. You just go on YouTube, go on social media and start doing your research on the types of artists that you gravitate towards, and the type of art that you gravitate towards, and start building your skill set. It's all about having fun and creating something that is uniquely you, right? It's not about what is the next trend that I want to follow and try to emulate. It should be coming from your passions. So for me, if I have to categorize myself, I'm more of a character concept artist, because what I always enjoy to do is drawing people and drawing characters, right? Yeah. So even though I can do environments, and I have done environments professionally, I'm less interested in just spending day after day painting environments with no characters. I enjoy drawing characters. I love anatomy and poses and gestures and all that kind of stuff, just like you. So so it's about your portfolio. Long answer short is about your portfolio, making it focused, showing your voice in that portfolio, and focusing on trying to get that to be as strong as possible.
Love that. Now, last question for you. I'm going to try to include links too, so that way people can easily click and find you. But if a kid out there is now interested in seeing your work, seeing what you've done and worked on, where can they find your stuff?
It's easy. Everything for me is Andy Park Art. So ANDYPARKART. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, ArtStation. My YouTube is I started it, but I only have a few videos in there, and eventually I'll do more.
Hey, a few videos is better than none. Okay, so
Yeah.
now comes the really daunting part for me to show you what I was able to work on while you're talking.
Oh,
I'm going to be
yes.
very self-conscious of this now, but hopefully the computer does not mess up the colors because sometimes it throws it off. I'm going to try, but
Oh my gosh. That's awesome. That's awesome.
there's
Nice.
no, I have no idea how that just appeared on the screen, but it got there.
I
So,
like it. I like it.
well, thank you so much again for coming on. It was such a pleasure getting to talk to you and learn about what you do, and thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. Again, I am your host and in-house artist, Erin Leffler. Catch you next time on The Drawing Board. I don't have one of those clickers yet, so I just kind of use my hands. The hands up. Good.